Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. We're going to get started in just a minute here. I'm just going to give it some time for everyone to come in from the waiting room. Let me quickly thank you, Cindy. Share my screen. I'm assuming that everyone can see my slides and nothing but my slides. Very good. All right, so welcome everyone. Today's webinar is on protecting homeowners in manufactured home communities. Before we get started, I just want to quickly tell you about the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania. We are a statewide coalition working to increase access to safe, decent, and affordable homes for all Pennsylvanians. Webinars are free for members, so become a member today. You can do that by visiting housingalliancepa.org/become a member or contacting us at info@housingalliancepa.org for more information. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, which includes time for question and answer. We encourage you to leave questions to our incredible group of speakers today. If you want to ask our speakers a question, please use the Q&A function, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. The chat function is only to ask the Housing Alliance logistical questions about the webinar or to answer specific questions that the presenters might ask you. Again, use the Q&A function for questions for the presenters. I also want to quickly tell you about some of the events that the Housing Alliance has that's upcoming. We have the Rural Pennsylvania Housing Summit on July 23rd at State College. Registration is now open. You can scan the QR code that you see on screen to access that link. We also have webinars every month, and the next one is going to be protecting housing and homelessness programs. It will include federal updates and actions that you can take. It will be from 1 to 1:30 p.m. on July 1st. You can scan the QR code that you see to the side of the screen to access the registration link for that. I also want to quickly talk about why protecting homeowners in manufactured home communities matter. Manufactured home communities make up a significant portion of the unsubsidized or naturally occurring affordable housing stock, especially in rural areas where affordable housing options are limited. These communities operate under a split tenure model, so residents may either own or rent their homes, but the land beneath them is typically owned by a separate individual or company. This arrangement makes residents particularly vulnerable to rent increases or displacement. And the residents of manufactured home communities are often low income and face barriers to accessing other forms of housing. That is why preserving these communities is so essential to maintain the affordable housing stock, and support housing stability for vulnerable populations, particularly in under-resourced rural areas. So to tell us more about this, we have our group of incredible speakers. We have Bob Besecker with the Coalition of Manufactured Home Communities. We have Dan Vitek with the Community Justice Project, and we have Cindy Daley with Regional Housing Legal Services. Thank you to Bob, Dan, and Cindy for being part of this webinar and for sharing their knowledge and expertise with our audience today. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Cindy.
And actually, we're going to start with Bob. So I will see you all later.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Chris. Welcome to Protecting Homeowners in Manufactured Home Communities. I would like to begin by thanking the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania for hosting this webinar. We appreciate it greatly. My name is Bob Besecker, and I'm a resident of Douglas Village in Douglasville, Berks County, Pennsylvania. And there I am co-chair of the Douglas Village Rent Issues Committee. Additionally, I'm the founder of Coalition of Manufactured Home Communities of Pennsylvania. So let's begin by what is a manufactured home? Since 1974, it's a home that's manufactured off-site. It's transported and set up on site, and any dollies or wheels that were put under it for the transport function are then removed and the hitches removed. At that point, it's pretty much permanent on that site. The homeowner can elect to attach a garage to it. They can attach decks or patios. All of this, of course, is at the discretion too of the owner of the manufactured home communities and what is permitted in that particular community. But in all respects, we own it. We're responsible for the repairs on it, the insurance coverage, any loan that had to be taken out to buy it, we're responsible for that. Most of the utilities, basically, we're just simply renting the land from the owner of the manufactured home community on which our home sits. So unless the home is more than 50 years old, it's not a camper, it's not a trailer, it's not a mobile home, and it's basically inaccurate and demeaning to call them that. They are manufactured homes. At this point, I've mentioned manufactured home community owners, the owners of the villages. You might be curious how many of them are there in Pennsylvania. According to a report done by the Federal Reserve Bank in Philadelphia in June of 2023, entitled Manufactured Home Communities in Pennsylvania, the Basics. That was authored by Eileen DeVringy. She did an excellent job with that report. There at that time were 2,288 manufactured home communities of various sizes in Pennsylvania. No one knows the exact number of residents. There's not really a way to substantiate that. I come at it from the standpoint that there's probably an average of 100 homes in each one of those communities and an average of 1.6 adults residing in each one of those homes. So if you do the math on that and multiply it by 2,288, that's about 366,000 residents in manufactured housing. That might not be accurate, but I've seen absolutely no facts to the contrary, so that's what I'm going to go with. As homeowners in a manufactured home community, who are we? Well, many manufactured home communities are ages 55 plus. I'm one of those. So how do we get here? What are our reasons? In many cases, we want to downsize. We have lived in our family homes, perhaps for a long, long time, raised our children there, and it's now time to make things a little easier, perhaps. It's time to downsize, one floor living, reduced maintenance, and the intangible of fellowship with others our age. The vast majority of us, as 55 plus, are retirees. We're finding that about 42% of the males that live in manufactured housing, 55 plus, are veterans. And because of our ages, we would be Vietnam era veterans. We have a lot of disabled folks live in manufactured housing, as you can imagine. We find that about 36% of the residents are single females, and nearly all of them widows. The one thing all of us have in common, though, is it's really our last true shot at independent living. Now, there are other types of manufactured home communities that I call them any age manufactured home communities. A lot of their reasons for moving into manufactured housing might be very similar to the over 55 plus. But In addition to that, the one thing that probably brought them to manufactured housing was in the form of an affordable starting home, or at least it used to be. Some have young families, but many of these any age communities have a lot of 55 plus residents too. The one thing that we all have in common, and Chris's slide at the beginning mentioned it, we have always viewed ourselves as unsubsidized affordable housing, meaning the government was not doing anything in the way of rent subsidies for us. And that's quite frankly the way we want it. So it was unsubsidized affordable housing. However, now in the last few years, I've recategorized it to unsubsidized, unaffordable housing. And this is primarily due to the greed of the private equity firms who have become involved. And I know Dan and Cindy will probably talk more about that. But I can tell you that residents are being absolutely crushed, and private equity firms do not care. It must be said that some manufactured home communities are owned by what we call mom and pop operators. They've owned the communities for a long time. They treat their residents with respect. They take care of the communities properly. And by and large, the things that I'm going to be talking about today don't include the mom and pop operators. With these high rent increases that are continuing to come our way out of these private equity firms, increasingly residents are having to make decisions, hard decisions. They know the lot rent has to be paid. So assuming they may be on limited income, maybe Social Security income, fixed incomes, what do? Well, I can tell you what some of them do, and that is they cut back on their nutritional needs. Things that maybe they should be buying, they aren't. They're passing it by. We have lot rent to pay. They're cutting back on their medicinal needs. Maybe they're halving their medication, thinking I can get by on that. Maybe they're not taking medication at all anymore. We have lot rent to pay. Then there's the intangible, reduced outside community involvement. You know how it is when you leave your home, and it's the same with us. When we leave our home and go out into the community, you spend money. We have lot rent to pay. So in essence, residents of manufactured housing are becoming increasingly trapped. In some cases, and I have heard this time and time again, homelessness is a real possibility. So what can we do? For me, it started in Douglas Village in early 2022. Our village had been purchased by an out-of-state owner in 2021. And at the end of that year, we heard that lot rents were going to be going up, and not just by a little bit, by a lot. So we formed a rent issues committee in February of 2022. There were about a dozen of us. We knew absolutely nothing. And at that time, there was no one to ask. So we started investigating. We soon discovered a law in Pennsylvania called Act 261. It's the Manufactured Home Community Rights Act. And in reading it, we realized that the act does not restrict the amount of yearly lot rent increases at all. The owners of a manufactured home community can raise lot rent whatever they want to without violating the law. So, okay, we need to have legislative changes. We need to have that occur in order to stop this process of unlimited lot rent gouging. I'll call it what it is. We also came to the realization that a committee of 12 in Douglas Village, Berks County, was going to be woefully insufficient to do the things that needed to be done. So at that time, we formed a coalition of manufactured home communities of Pennsylvania. And the first manufactured home communities, the residents joined in August of 2022. Growth was pretty slow the first year. We knew where the communities were, but we didn't know who the movers and shakers within the community might be. We started a Facebook page, and through that Facebook page, we were able to make contact with the residents in some of these communities, and they began to join. So the growth exploded in the second year and is continuing in the third year. Currently, we have 89 communities statewide. And at the end of my presentation, we'll be able to show you a slide that gives you some idea of where they're all located. The thing about the coalition is all of us are residents of manufactured home communities, and all of us are volunteers. We don't get a dime for this. It's important. We just can't walk away from it. We find the coalition growing as more people learn about us, and this webinar may be one way that they'll do that. We also participated in a seminar at the Federal Reserve Bank in Philadelphia in last June. So people do learn about us, and when they know what we stand for, they want to become involved. I'm operating on the basis that with the 89 communities that we have right now, we're probably representing about 14,000 residents of those communities. So it's not insignificant. The thing about the coalition is we are no longer naive. As a matter of fact, we're the source of information and action on this issue in the Commonwealth. We're now supported by a legal team, and together with them, we offer suggestions for legislation. And we also rally residents in member communities to phone and visit their representative, their senator, and to tell their story and ask the elected officials for their support. We've also formed a publicity arm, and we expect them to become very active within about the next week or two. With all of this, why would not 100% of the General Assembly support the legislation that is currently before them. The usual reason given is the need to protect the rights of businesses to operate without interference from us, from resident homeowners. They need protection from us. Not really, not really. It's the other way around. Reasons vary, but when they're asked the question, are you going to support out-of-state private equity firms or the resident homeowners of Pennsylvania? Most times we don't get much of an answer on that. The thing is, the legislation does need to move quickly, very quickly, before the private equity firms destroy us. A little bit about the rents. Some rents 4 or 5 years ago may have been in the $400 range. You'll now find them to be up around the $800 range. Some of those monthly lot rent figures are even higher than that in some areas, $900, $1,000 lot rent. It's outrageous. In that regard, when the homeowners within a manufactured home community are crushed beneath the high lot rents, then the whole structure crashes. I like to say that we're kind of like the goose that lays the golden egg. The whole monetary structure depends on us when we pay our lot rents. So that includes the builders of the home, the tradesmen, the people who transport the homes, the people who set up the homes, realtors, lenders, and a myriad of other businesses, including the owners and the operators of the manufactured home communities themselves. Although private equity firms apparently don't care all that much about that, they'll just move on. They'll just move on to something else. But when we're crushed, the structure is in danger of being crushed also, or at least severely impacted. All of this is happening whenever it's acknowledged by all legislators, I believe, that there's a severe housing shortage of affordable housing in Pennsylvania. At such a time, why would any legislator vote against a change to save such a significant amount of affordable housing which currently exists? Well, I'm not quite sure about the answer to that question, but I can tell you that our coalition will provide any of them with the facts so they can see things as they really are. And I must be truthful about this. Many legislators are seeing the light. And I know that I think Cindy will talk more about the legislative aspects, but most recently, a bill that we had before the Pennsylvania House of Representatives passed with overwhelming support, bipartisan support. And I know that at some point, some of those folks that voted for the bill were not necessarily going to do that. But they finally realized the importance of their vote. So with that, I think my portion of this is pretty much done. I know Cindy has some slides to put up. I would just end by saying relative to the legislation, that action is needed of it immediately. Uh, this slide that she has up now indicates the various counties uh, where members of the Coalition of Manufactured Housing Community exist. You can see by the color scheme the number of communities in each county that currently exist. We'll start with Berks County, which is in the lower right-hand corner of the quadrant. You'll see it's kind of an aqua color, which means that we have 11 communities in Berks County. And probably the reason for that is because this is where it originated. So it was quite easy to hit the streets. It's very interesting. And I'll talk about that just another minute or two, if I might. When I go into a community, and I usually like to do it this time of year because you see people outside working, I'll stop and I'll get out of the car and go over and chat with them a little bit, identify myself. I tell them I'm with the Coalition of Manufactured Home Communities of Berks County, and we're striving to do something about the issue of high lot rents, which is affecting so many manufactured home communities in the state. And then I ask them, does this apply to you? And I don't even have to wait to hear their answer because it's visible in their face as soon as I ask the question. And the answer is yes, we are, or we are very fearful that it's going to start really, really soon. So with that, another member community has been recruited. This is the report from the Federal Reserve Bank that I referenced earlier. It's an excellent report. I got a lot out of it. And if you have an opportunity, it is downloadable. So you can have the ability to read that for yourself. So with that, I think at this point, I'll turn it over to Dan Vitek from the Community Justice Project. And he's a great guy. Welcome, Dan.
Hi, thanks, Bob, both for that introduction as well as for your comments on the present state of the mobile home market in Pennsylvania. I think, what Bob brings is a real clear description of the impact that some of the recent changes in the mobile home park landscape over the last decade have had on the residents of the parks themselves. And I just want to take a second to go through some of the recent history, so the background on what these market changes are. But let me first just fully introduce myself. I'm Dan Vitek. I'm an attorney with the Community Justice Project. We're a small nonprofit law firm that works across the Commonwealth to help improve the lives of Pennsylvanians and enforce their rights. I do a lot of work over the last 6 or so years representing residents of mobile home communities, taking on issues anywhere from illegal fees that they've been charged to, forcing infrastructure repairs when a park owner is ignoring them. That's kept me pretty busy and sent me across the state. So I've seen a lot of what Bob has mentioned in terms of, the troubling developments in these communities. But I also want to emphasize that, working in these communities, it's always clear to me just how much of a neighborhood and a sense of community these parks have, and how valuable that is to the residents there and to the broader, places that they live. So it is important to keep this source of affordable housing and also this source of community, keep it going and keep it healthy. So the background here, I think, begins actually just quickly with manufactured home communities really come to the landscape after World War II. And then with changes in production, it becomes easier to produce them. They become better quality homes. And really in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, mobile home parks begin to proliferate across Pennsylvania and become a significant source of housing. And then that dies down, and the creation of new parks is really ground to a halt over the last few decades. So we're set with the parks that we have for the most part. And those parks were typically owned locally, what you would consider mom and pop ownership for many, many years. But as those parks have aged, their owners have aged along with them and are now often looking to turn over the property to someone else, which, frequently means putting it on the market for sale. And in the last decade or so, what we've seen coming into the market to purchase these are not the local mom and pop owners, but in fact, investors looking to purchase multiple parks and operating, mostly, across state lines, and across the country. So this investment-backed ownership comes into the marketplace, and they're starting to rapidly change how these parks are managed, how they're operated. And you see small investors that maybe own one or two parks, all the way up to some of the biggest investment firms in America. Private equity groups like BlackRock, Apollo Global Management, the Carlyle Group. These are groups that you probably recognize, at least know the name of from the news and things like that. And they're coming in and scooping up these parks and really applying their business model to how they're operated. So we'll get into that in a second, but I think it's just important to emphasize that we are in this moment of change where mom and pop parks are really no longer the driving force behind how mobile home parks operate. And that change is significant, and I think that's a big part of what's led to the issues that Bob just raised in such clear and personal detail. So what exactly is the private equity model that we're dealing with? Private equity is a means for a fund to pool investment, and then the strategy is to take those investments, go out and buy a stake in a corporation, and really take take control of that corporation through their majority stake in the company. Find ways to increase profitability and try to turn over the company, sell it back out to the public or to another private investor. And there is where the private equity firm will make their return on investment. So these are usually fairly short-term investments where they come in and they really change how the company is operating to increase profitability, sell it because they've increased profitability, and take the gain in sales and send it back to their investors. So I think that what we all have to understand is why exactly have mobile home parks become such an enticing investment for private equity? And there's a few things that set the mobile home park market apart from, say, other housing markets, like, the apartment or other rental properties. The first thing is that, as Bob pointed out, once these homes are delivered to a park and set up in the community, they really become permanent. it is very difficult to move a home. It's also very expensive. The longer a home's been on the lot, the more likely it is to be completely immobile, right? And so that creates a captive audience where people have invested in their homes, they're living in these homes, they can't move them. And so the park owner really has a market that it can't, is unable to respond to different pressures. And what I mean by that is you raise the rents and people can't move out of the park easily. You have a much stronger hand to play as the park owner in what you can set prices at. So that is one thing that these outside investors really like about these investments and being able to rapidly improve their profitability. Another thing is, of course, that there is a limited amount of affordable housing out there. And so there aren't too many options for people. There's a lot of demand to get into these parks. And so private equity can take advantage of that high demand marketplace. But there's a third thing that they can take advantage of that I think is extremely important. And again, sets mobile home parks and communities apart from other housing markets. And that is that people who own their mobile home or their manufactured home, they have purchased that themselves, and they're responsible for the maintenance of that. They're responsible for any improvements, like Bob said, adding garages, stairs, decks, adding a shed, things like that, right? So upgrading the appliances, right? So they own the home, they've purchased it, often, with some financing, and they've improved it and they've maintained it. And so all that creates equity in their home, just like any other homeowner across the state. Your goal is to purchase a place and then maintain it, pay down on the loan, and create equity. And as inflation increases and housing prices go up, you've got your home and you're benefiting from the equity that you've created in that home, right? But because because this is a unique situation where you own the home but you don't own the land underneath it, a park owner can take advantage of the equity that a manufactured home owner has created in their own home. And what I mean by that is, if you think about the housing cost as just one big, bubble, right? And part of that bubble is, okay, the payment for the home itself. And another part is the, upkeep of the home. And then your actual lot rent. Okay, that's the total that you can spend on your housing costs. And, most people in these parks are on a fixed income or don't have too much flexibility in the total amount of income they have. So they can only spend so much on their total housing costs before they really start feeling those pressures and have to, as Bob pointed out, give up on their nutritional needs, right? Buy less food, deal with their medical issues differently, cut down on medication and doctor visits and things like that. So they've moved into this park, they've purchased this home, they have this equity. In comes a new owner and looks at that and says, you know what, I can take advantage of that equity, because if this person wants to stay in the park, they have to keep paying the lot rent. And so they start raising the lot rent, and the mobile home owner, right, says, oh, the lot rent's going up. Let me see what else is out there. Maybe I'll move to an apartment. But they've got all this equity in their home, and so it's much more likely that they'll say, well, no, I'll just pay the higher lot rent, because if I move out, right, I'm going to be paying market rate rent in an apartment somewhere, and that, say is is $10,000, but I've already paid off my home. So I'm only paying, lot rent plus maintenance costs on my home. The rest I've built up this equity in my home. So, well, the owner says, okay, well, I'll just raise the lot rent even more. And now the person's saying, well, okay, I still have to pay my maintenance costs on the home and this lot rent's going up. But when I bundle those together, it's still a little cheaper than the market rate rent somewhere else in an apartment. But eventually those even out, right? And the person the mobile home owner is losing all that equity in their home. So eventually they say, all right, I've got to get out of here. I'm going to move to an apartment because the lot rent has gone so high. I'm going to move to an apartment. But the person they're going to sell that home to comes in and says, okay, I'm going to buy your home, but I also have to pay this high lot rent. I can't negotiate the high lot rent, so I'm not going to pay you very much for your home. And that's how the home equity is being reduced because the lot rents are going up. And investment buyers, they understand this. They look at these investments and they say people have equity in these homes. They're not going to give them up until we can raise rents, almost to the same as having an apartment before anyone is going to be able to or be forced to be to move out of the park. And so they can really take advantage of really the main reason that these parks are so beneficial to the community and to the people who live there. And that is that they've purchased their home and they've invested in their home, both money and, sweat equity, and built up this nice place to live, thinking that, okay, that's going to pay off over all these years that I'll be living here. And instead, the lot rent just keeps going up and up and up and eating into that equity amount, that margin. So I think people have to understand some of the differences here in this marketplace with mobile homes versus other housing markets, and why it's become such a lucrative investment for private equity. They're really taking advantage of what the community members have created there. And the consequence is that the residents are being forced out of these homes or are forced to really cut back on their own needs in order to stay here, so that private equity and these investment owners can pull that money out in profit and then turn the place around. And I also want to note that as I explain this business model, I want people to understand that there is a portion of these purchases that are being financed by government policy. Freddie Mae and Fannie Mac, Fannie Mac and Freddie Mae. Sorry, no, I got that right the first time, wrong the second time. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac guarantee these big loans for investment buyers to purchase these parks. And that allows them to purchase the parks at higher amounts, purchase more of them. And generally those, guaranteed loans are not available to the mom and pops who used to own these parks or might be looking to purchase a park locally. So that gives a great advantage to the larger investors that are coming into these communities and buying up these parks, and then applying that business model I just discussed to really change the marketplace in Pennsylvania. All right. Yeah, I think I already covered this slide, and so just move on. Well, I know I want to give Cindy enough time to talk about hers, but I'll just briefly discuss, one of the things that Bob's group asked me to come in and take a look at was what are the legal issues around the legislature coming in and helping to moderate this imbalance in the marketplace between these new investment owners and the residents of the mobile home communities. And I think we all understand that under our constitutional system, property rights are very important. And the Constitution protects owners of property from laws that unfairly infringe upon their property rights, their ability to do what they want with their property. But we also recognize that that right is not unlimited. The government is able to use what they call their police powers, basically their ability to, for in the public good, regulate what someone does with their property. So think about pollution that spills over onto public land or affects adjacent property owners, that can be regulated. Well, the same thing applies in the marketplace in terms of making sure that rents are fair and using public policy to create a rent justification system. In fact, the Supreme Court of the United States, in a case in the 1980s with Chief Justice Rehnquist writing the opinion, specifically upheld the government's ability to regulate rents within the housing market itself. And then in the late 90s, they did so again when it came to rent justification in mobile home parks. And so as long as the law is allowing for property owners to be able to receive a fair return on their investment still, and to have a process for determining when rent increases are justified, and continue to create that fair return on investment. The legislature is allowed to intervene in the marketplace and make sure that this imbalance is adjusted and that everybody has a fair shot at how this particular market that's so important, the housing market, plays out. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Cindy to take a look at the legislation angle.
Thanks, Dan. So yes, I'm Cindy Daley. I'm with Regional Housing Legal Services, and Regional Housing provides legal assistance to nonprofit organizations that are developing affordable housing, but we also have a policy arm. We do a lot of research and advocacy on all aspects of things related to increasing opportunities for people to have affordable homes, community empowerment. We have a sister organization, the Pennsylvania Utility Law Project, that, as the name implies, focuses on utility issues. So we're really honored to be working on this with the coalition. In Bob's presentation, he mentioned Act 261, the Manufactured Home Community Rights Act, sometimes called MACRA. This law dates back to 1974, when it was called the Mobile Home Park Rights Act. It was enacted to prevent residents from being evicted just because the community owner, didn't want to renew a lease. It created what's known as good cause eviction protections for residents of manufactured home communities, or MHCs. I'll use that acronym. And that means there needs to be a reason, like non-payment of rent or repeated violations of community rules, in order to be evicted. Good cause eviction does not apply to other renters in Pennsylvania, even today. MACRA recognizes that residents of MHCs are not just renters. Most of them are homeowners too. And while, as has been said, the homes were once mobile in that they were transported from a factory, once they're set on a foundation, they can't easily be moved. And so these homeowners need special protections. MACRA was amended in 2012 after a number of communities had been closed, so the land could be used for commercial or more expensive residential development. And the amendments require advance notice of a community closure to the residents, the municipality, the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, and it gives a resident association or nonprofit organization an opportunity to purchase the community. In the event that doesn't happen, there are relocation expenses provided for homeowners who do move their homes, and a minimum purchase price for owners who can't or choose not to move their homes, but instead sell them to the owners. So again, a lot of special protections for MHC homeowners. And unrelated to the park closure, also a provision for determining when somebody has moved out, left the home behind, determining that it's actually abandoned. What it doesn't cover is how high the lot rents can be increased, increases for fees. And as you've heard, this has become a major problem for MHC homeowners now that institutional investors have entered the market. Earlier attempts at legislating the increases stalled, but Representatives Hanbidge, Serrato, and Webster, and Senator Schwank worked with the coalition and the legal team to come up with legislation that would garner support. And we now have two bills, I'll mention a third, but two bills addressing what rent reasonableness. House Bill 1250 and Senate Bill 745 do allow increases for rent and fees. They use the Consumer Price Index as the standard, allowing a minimum of a 2% increase and a maximum of a 4% increase without any questions asked. If the CPI is below 2%, the owner may still increase rents and fees by 2%. If the CPI is over 4%, the of right increase is limited to 4%. But if the MHC owner's expenses have gone up more than what's allowed by right, they can provide the homeowners with an explanation of why they need to charge more. If the homeowners feel the increase is not justified, they can meet with the community owner or challenge the increase through the Attorney General's office or in court. The bills lay out a time frame for both the MHC owner and the homeowners to act. These allowable increases protect responsible community owners, but also protect homeowners against price gouging by investors who are only interested in a quick profit. The bills also prohibit lot rent increases if there is a health or safety violation against the MHC owner, unless the owner will be using the money to correct the violation. The legislation extends the time frame for notice before an increase can go into effect and for a time for the residents to respond. The residents' response might be to accept the increase, but on the other hand, they might decide to move, and the bills would extend the time the resident has to sell their home or move it. The bills protect residents' rights to hold meetings and to organize associations. This has been a problem in some places. Senate Bill 745 has a separate surcharge for capital improvements, similar to a special assessment levied by a homeowners association. This would cover things like replacing a sewer system or fixing roads, things that the community owner might finance over a short period of time, and should not be rolled into the rent, where it becomes part of the basis for the next rent increase. Both bills apply to all new leases and lease renewals or extensions. Whenever the terms of a lease are changed, like by increasing the rent, a lease renewal or an extension is considered a new lease under the law, even if the parties haven't signed it again. Senator Schwank also introduced Senate Bill 746, which gives the residents or a nonprofit organization the opportunity to purchase their community if it's offered for sale, and before it can be sold to a third party. There are several examples in Pennsylvania and many throughout the country where residents have acquired communities and now run them for their own benefit. So where are we now? House Bill 1250 last week passed the House of Representatives, as Bob mentioned, by a very bipartisan vote of 144 to 59. This strong showing was due to the tremendous work by the coalition members, what they did in reaching out to their representatives and telling their stories. When the Senate's back in session next week, we expect the House bill to be assigned to the Senate Urban Affairs and Housing Committee, where Senate Bills 745 and 746 are already waiting for action. Senate Bill 745, the rent reasonableness bill, has 12 co-sponsors in addition to Senator Schwank, 8 Democrats and 4 Republicans. The Resident Opportunity to Purchase bill, as Senate Bill 746, has 14 co-sponsors, 10 Democrats and 4 Republicans. We hope to see the committee take action soon. So what happens next? The action is now in the Senate, and Senate leadership can decide to move House Bill 1250. And if the Senate passes it unchanged, it then goes to the governor for his signature. Or they might decide they want to move their own bill, Senate Bill 745. So that would need to pass the Senate, go over to the House, and because both chambers have to pass the same bill with the same bill number, not different versions, not their own versions, even if the 2 bills are identical, which in this case they're not. If, just as a matter of process, what happens if the second chamber amends the bill it receives? So that is, if the Senate were to amend House Bill 1250, would have to go back to where it came from. In this case, go back to the House for what's called a concurrence vote. A concurrence vote is only a yes or no vote on the amendment. There's no other debate on the bill. And once both chambers approve the same version of the same bill, it goes to the governor. So there are a lot of opportunities for getting involved, but don't wait, because now's the time to take action. You'll get a copy of this, this PowerPoint, and so you'll have our contact information. We hope you'll get in touch. Let us know what's happening in manufactured home communities where you live, and join the coalition, join their efforts to protect homeowners. And we can take questions.
We have time for one question really quickly. The question is, where can we find reliable statewide data about the egregious lot rent increase of these MHCs? I believe it could be used as critical evidence to support legislation change.
So there is no collection of the data because nobody's required to report it. Owners don't report their rent to anybody, whether in MHCs or in apartments elsewhere. But I think the coalition is doing a good job of collecting stories. And Bob, you can talk a little bit about your Facebook page.
Yeah. First, relative to the rental amounts, we don't track that simply because it doesn't provide us with a whole lot of information that we're going to be able to use on a regular basis. And the lot rents change so frequently, once a year by all 89 communities. So it's information that we'd rather use our human resources to work the legislative aspect rather than be busy accumulating data, which really doesn't help us all that much. The Facebook page is an opportunity for people to exchange some information, depending on how in depth it gets, and that's available. That was on the page that Cindy just put up, our Facebook page information, as well as my email address. People are able to email me at any time. I will get back to them. Might take me a little longer than it used to because we're growing, but I will get back to anyone who sends me an email.
And I'll just add that Even though there's no comprehensive data, it's important to use your own stories when you reach out to your representative and your senator. So if you, your neighbors, your community, neighbor and communities are experiencing lot rents, let these folks know.
Thank you, Cindy, Bob, and Dan. We are at time. Thank you all for attending, for asking questions. The recording for the webinar, as well as the answers to the questions, will be up on the website within a week's time. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.